Right now, even as you are watching this, your brain is doing something that no computer, no machine, no artificial system has ever fully replicated. It is generating a continuous, self-referential, largely uncontrollable stream of thought that runs beneath and alongside and sometimes completely over the top of whatever you are trying to pay attention to, a stream that includes memories you didn't choose to recall, worries about things that haven't happened yet, judgments about things that already have, half-formed plans, unresolved conversations, random associations, sudden songs, embarrassing moments from 7 years ago, and the specific, slightly maddening awareness that you are trying to stop thinking about all of these things, and that the trying is itself producing more thoughts. And if you have ever lain awake wishing your brain came with an off switch, if you have ever sat down to meditate and discovered that your mind had approximately 400 opinions about the silence you were trying to create, if you have ever wondered whether the relentlessness of your own thinking is normal or something specific to you, then today we are going to answer that completely, because the neuroscience of why you cannot stop thinking is one of the most fascinating and most practically useful bodies of knowledge in all of cognitive science. And understanding it will change not just how you relate to your own thinking, but how you understand the extraordinary, occasionally exhausting, fundamentally irreplaceable nature of the human mind. Let's begin with the most important neurological fact about the thinking brain. And that is that the default state of the human brain is not silence, not rest, not the absence of thought, but precisely the opposite, which is the continuous, self-generating, energy-intensive production of mental content that neuroscientists call the default mode network, a system of interconnected brain regions, including the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, and the angular gyrus that activates not when the brain is working, but when it is not externally occupied, not when you are focused on a task, but when you are between tasks, not when you are engaged with the world, but when you are left alone with yourself. And here is the remarkable and counterintuitive fact about this system. It consumes nearly as much energy as the brain uses during focused external attention, which means that the mind wandering, the ruminating, the endless internal monologue that feels like your brain idling is not idling at all. It is running one of the most metabolically expensive operations in the entire central nervous system, processing social information, simulating future scenarios, integrating emotional experiences, consolidating memory, and constructing the ongoing narrative of self that is the psychological foundation of your identity. The default mode network is not a malfunction. It is one of the most important and most sophisticated neural systems the human brain possesses, and the thoughts it generates are not noise. They are the output of a brain doing its most fundamental work, which is making sense of your life, your relationships, your past, and your future in the continuous, integrative, self-referential way that no other known cognitive system on Earth can do. Now, let's examine why the thinking becomes excessive. Why, for many people, the default mode network does not simply do its important work and settle into a background hum, but instead escalates into the kind of relentless, circular, exhausting overthinking that feels less like useful processing and more like being trapped in a room where every surface is a mirror and every reflection generates another reflection in a loop with no visible exit. The primary mechanism behind excessive thinking is what psychologists call rumination. The specific cognitive pattern of repetitively and passively focusing on distress and its causes and consequences without moving toward resolution, which research by Susan Nolan Hoeksema at Yale identifies as one of the most consistent psychological predictors of anxiety, depression, and the specific experience of mental exhaustion that most people associate with being unable to stop thinking. Rumination is not the same as reflection. Reflection is purposeful, moves toward new understanding or decision, and terminates when its cognitive goal is achieved. Rumination is repetitive, circular, emotion-driven, and self-perpetuating, generating not new insight but the same distressing content in slightly different arrangements. And it persists not because it is useful, but because the emotional intensity of the content keeps the brain's threat detection system activated, and an activated threat detection system continues to prioritize the threatening content over the brain's attempts to redirect attention, which is why telling yourself to stop thinking about something almost never works and almost always makes it worse, because the instruction to stop thinking about something requires thinking about the thing you are trying to stop thinking about in order to know what to avoid, which is the cognitive equivalent of trying to escape quicksand by struggling harder. There is also the role of unfinished psychological business. The Zeigarnik effect operating at the level of emotional processing rather than simple task completion, keeping the brain's attentional resources allocated to unresolved emotional experiences, unprocessed grief, unexpressed anger, unacknowledged fear, the conversations that were never had, and the decisions that were never made, all of which the brain holds open as active cognitive files, requiring ongoing attentional maintenance until they are genuinely processed and resolved, rather than merely suppressed or distracted from. And here is the practical and psychological truth that this entire video has been building toward. The insight that changes the relationship with unstoppable thinking from one of frustrated resistance to one of informed engagement. You cannot stop thinking because your brain was not designed to stop thinking. It was designed to think continuously, to process endlessly, to generate and evaluate and simulate without interruption, because that continuous cognitive activity is the mechanism by which human beings navigate a social world of extraordinary complexity, anticipate futures of genuine uncertainty, and maintain the coherent self-narrative that psychological integrity requires. The goal is not to silence the mind, it is to redirect it, to give the default mode network the specific, processable, resolution-oriented content that allows it to complete its work and move on, rather than cycling through unresolvable emotional content indefinitely. Which is why journaling works, why therapy works, why genuine conversation works, why physical exercise works. Not because they stop the thinking, but because they give the thinking somewhere to go, a target rich enough and resolvable enough that the brain's extraordinary processing machinery can actually finish what it started and experience. If only briefly and if only partially, the specific and beautiful quiet that follows not the suppression of thought, but its genuine completion. Subscribe for more Mind Secrets.